for the state of basketball leader, Fan Radio Network,
Believe.
and KFAN.com. 2 minutes and 33 seconds past the hour of 2 o'clock. No, those are the old days. After 3 o'clock, Central Daylight Saving Time, we welcome you back to a Monday edition of the afternoon Aardvark on a, I guess, seasonable Monday afternoon here for late March in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. My name is Dan Barreiro, the host of the program. This will shock you. Guardsy's not available today.
Funny.
And might not be available for most of the week. More on that later. That means Brett Blakemore is back in the chair. And we're delighted that he's back with us. We're delighted that you are along for the afternoon ride as well. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is open at 64686. Is there room for the state of basketball and the state of hockey? I've always believed the two could coexist easily, side by side. I understand that the tradition, one could argue, is greater in the state of hockey. The truth of the matter is, I guess you could say inconvenient truth, is that on the professional side, we were the state of basketball before we were the state of hockey. It wasn't even close. The Minneapolis Lakers are an historic franchise. I think they ended up winning 5 titles here. Eventually, of course, they fled to the West Coast and went pretty well. It has gone pretty well in Los Angeles over the years. But our history when it comes to pro basketball goes back a lot further than it does in professional hockey. I understand on the local level, the kids level, the youth level, hockey has got a very special place. And this really isn't to say, I think we're under the mistaken notion that you have to choose one or the other. I really don't think you should have to. And over the weekend, it was a pretty good weekend for the state of basketball. In fact, a very good weekend for the state of basketball. And to that end, I probably need to issue an apology, an official apology to a Wolves player by the name of Bones Hyland. One of the best nicknames. There's so few good nicknames left in sports. Bones Hyland. I need to apologize to. I'm not ready to say that he's comeback player of the year, but I think it is incumbent upon me to say that I doubted him too much. I just thought, okay, cute little extra piece. He's had a moment or two, and Tim Conley was obsessed with him because he drafted him in Denver, and he brought him here, and he's been here 2 or 3 times, and we're happy for him. You know, nice nickname, good story.
Nice celebration he does.
Exactly,
yeah.
But where is this really going? Well, there's obviously a little bit more meat on the bone. No pun intended. As he proved again, I think, conclusively in front of a national audience last night that kind of maybe was introduced to Bones Hyland in a way that they had no idea he even existed. He was the story in Boston, Massachusetts, where the Minnesota Timberwolves on a night where everybody, including me, expected them to go belly up pretty easily, took care of business against a Boston Celtic club that could not hit a three-point shot but refused to stop taking them. That's, sadly, the league. It makes, at times, for some really hideous, ugly basketball. There's nothing particularly inventive or creative about it. But they kept shooting them, and they, in this case, kept missing them. Meanwhile, the Wolves hit enough of them, and more than anything else, Bones Hyland injected a bit of verve, a bit of elan, look it up, a bit of electricity and voltage into a club that, missing Anthony Edwards, certainly needed exactly that. And also, given that, from an offensive standpoint, Julius Randle was pretty much a no-show until late. So your Minnesota Timberwolves get a nice victory nice fiber win on the road against Boston. As they hit a part of their schedule that is very, very difficult and very, very challenging. I think Bones ended up with, was it 22 points? Let's look it up here to be 23. We were down, were the Wolves 15. Looked like it was going to be one of those days again. After all, we had not beaten Boston in 7,685 days, going all the way back to March 6, 2005. And we're reminded by our 3:30 guest, John Athletic, that the Wolves outscored the Celtics by 26 points in Highland's 30 minutes. And he writes a lot about injecting a little bit of joy, verve, into a club that is known for its moodiness and for its, is dourness a word? It should be if it isn't. That's our rep. We don't have a lot of guys who smile all that much. Bones Highland, when it's going, he's smiling. He's doing his little celebration when he makes threes. And it kind of does put a smile on your face. Now, let's be clear. You ain't going to smile if you can't ultimately win the game, right? Celebrations are nice, but if the game ends in loss at some point, that's not going to have much of an impact. But nevertheless, his, I guess you could say, joyful performance translated into a victory, and he's had some nice performances where he has actually been an igniter, along with my guy, Dosunmu. Ayo Dosunmu was outstanding again yesterday, running the show, getting stuff done, scoring, assisting, and more than anything else, he is a mother of a defender. He really is. He is. The more I watch him play, the more I enjoy watching him play. And I think, again, as we said at the time, an absolutely great acquisition at the deadline. Not as high profile as a huge name like Blakemore's guy in Milwaukee, Giannis, but an effective player for sure who didn't obviously necessitate in getting him breaking up the rest of the team. And yet, in the state of basketball, for those of us who have a Basketball Jones, that's a callback, it really probably was not, the Wolves' win was not as good as impressive as it was. It was probably not the highlight. The highlight, your Golden Gopher women's basketball team has advanced to the Sweet 16 for the first time in like 20 years. And for the second straight game at home, they looked, heading into the fourth quarter, dead. They looked out of it. They looked like it was going to end very, very quickly. And because they were playing a better team in Ole Miss than they were Friday against Green Bay, I think it certainly felt like, well, it was fun while it lasted. Right? There was really not much to indicate that this club was going to do what it did, which for the second straight fourth quarter, dominate. In the two fourth quarters at home, first two rounds of the tournament, the Gophers outscored their opponent a combined 49-18. That's authoritative. That's clutch. And, of course, they got a clutch basket at the end, a clutch 3 semi-late, a clutch 2 to win it, even though Ole Miss got a reasonably good look after that, but the ball, I think, bounced off of the front of the rim. So, all in all, a really good weekend for the state of basketball. Not a bad weekend for the state of hockey. Although we reviewed it yesterday, we got a nice victory on Saturday over the Dallas Stars, correct? In OT.
Yes, sir.
We'll certainly take that. So that works as well. But I continue to believe, and I understand that there's this sort of built-in rivalry, allegedly, that it's almost like there are people as fans who believe if you love, you're only allowed to love hockey or basketball, not both. And the hardcores, that's probably always going to be true. But I actually believe there's a growing part of the population that does like a good story, likes to see some success and doesn't have that built-in. There's so much defensiveness in the hockey community, as we've known, we've established over the decades, Kevin Follis, about, we're ignored too much, and we're always the ones who are ignored, and we're left behind, and we're, the little engine that could out of St. Paul. But I think there's a silent majority of people say, yeah, bring it both on. It's richer for everybody that at least we know this much. And we often could not count on this, that both winter sports teams will be advancing to the postseason. Now, that's not as impressive as doing it in baseball or certainly even in football, even though we have expanded the football playoffs. But it's even as limiting as that is, we couldn't count on it, that we would have both basketball and hockey teams in the postseason. One of them now coming off 2 straight Final Four appearances. The other thinking it can be a factor despite not really having much history, having not gotten out of the round for 10 years. So I'm here to embrace all of it. I don't think you have to take sides. You can have your favorite. I don't think you have to take sides. I think even Blakemore has shown a willingness, an open-mindedness to say, all right, I'm going to explore this basketball thing a little bit. Doesn't mean you have to like it as much. You're not as invested in it. Your investment doesn't go back as far. But I don't think anybody is obligated to rip it or to, why do I have to pay attention to that basketball stuff or hockey? So much, luck involved, puck going off of people's bodies. It's just, what's the point? I think you could like both. And right now, I think you could feel pretty good about both teams. I think in the case of the Wolves, they need to sustain. We've talked as recently as Sunday, the way Julius Randle got called out, the inconsistency of the club. But anytime, let's face it, the Wolves roster has been pretty static, right? No major changes since the last trade before the start of last season. So if there was going to be improvement or any sort of change of the basketball dynamics, it was going to have to come from within. And what should be, I think, a little encouraging is maybe with the 2 Lightning guards off the bench, well, Ayo if he's back on the bench when Anthony comes back, which would be a mistake, but if he is, you now have 2 fast guards who I think are starting to feel their oats a little bit. Like they're willing to take a little bit, they have a little more freedom going their way, that they can assert themselves more than just in this sort of, okay, everybody, there's 5 other players in the pecking order ahead of us. And if that can sort of change how the bench looks, or even change the sensibility of a club that can get a little dour, that's all good. That should be encouraging as well. And in the case of the Wild, we know what the reality is. They're kind of stuck in this ground where they are where they are. So it's a matter now of staying as healthy as possible, getting as healthy as possible, figuring out what combinations work best for the club, and probably most importantly, hoping that the goaltending can get hot at just the right time. Let's take our first pause now. I mentioned the uglydeck.com guest lineup includes John Athletic in about 15 minutes. We've got Guardsy. Now, he's now more often a guest on the show than he's producing the show. He's going to join us at, it's remarkable, isn't it? He's going to join at, what did we say, 4:15?
Yeah.
I went with 4:15. He said, it didn't matter either way to him. Speaking of basketball, the women's basketball coach, University of Minnesota, Dawn Plitzwhite's going to join us for a quick hit, probably about 5:15 or so. And then Louie has got some scheduling issues tomorrow. So Tuesday regular Luigi, he will join us on Monday's show. I'm going to get on today's show, I'm going to ask him that question. As a guy who had to research this stuff, whether there's any reason there has to be in a metro area this size an either or, basketball or hockey. I still think one of the things that should the folks in this town should feel good about is somebody can do the research on this. I think we remain the smallest population-wise metropolitan market to have teams in all, if you want to call the traditional Big Four sports, to have teams in all of them, not to mention the WNBA, soccer, etc.
Well, if you can count the Twins.
Well, that's very true. Because there was a time when the Wolves were brought into town where it was, something's going to have to give. This town is not big enough to have that many. There is no other town our size that is able to sustain economically football, basketball, baseball, and hockey on the professional level. And I think we've pretty much proven that to be not true. At least here, we have that going for us. And that's a good-sized toy department, even if we rarely get the results that we are looking for. First pause. And as I said, we'll set up the rest of the program, take a couple of your texts when we return.
Feel the energy of the state of hockey. Minnesota Wild back at Grand Casino Arena. Don't miss the speed, the hits, the roar of the crowd. Get your tickets now. Wild.com/tickets. Wild.com/tickets.
A couple of our amateur researchers say Denver, metro area of Denver, is actually measured smaller than MSP, and they too have everything. And that might be true. I think it depends on how you measure the population. They're, I would say, somewhat in the same ballpark, but I think both markets could share the fact that a lot of the predictions were it's just not going to hold up, or something's going to have to give. And part of the reason that was the speculation here was the Stars did give. They left, right? And there was a concern that, maybe we're in a different place when we got the expansion Wild, but there was still a little bit of that hidden concern. We've talked to Louie about that, and we'll probably do so again today when he joins us in about 2 hours. Get Blakemore a cot. Guardsy's out a lot. Need the Wild to get hot. Wolves in 5. That's from Rick.
I'm in.
The photo ball guy. I think you do have a cot here, don't you? Well, you used to sleep on the couch in the performance room, but then they
took it away.
It's under construction now, and it's gone, right?
Yeah,
I don't think
that was
there's
my
any
spot.
That was your spot for sure. Alan in Afton writes, Dan, on the Gopher women's hockey coach hire, did the smiling assassin just do another Ben Johnson hire? This should be a top 3 job in women's hockey, and the best person we could hire is the assistant to the guy we fired? Seems like a convenient, low-cost hire. Are we saving money for the less successful men's program? Well, I'm not sure I can argue with that. It's apparently now official, right? Greg Boom May will take over as the Golden Gopher women's head hockey coach. He had been the team's associate head coach for the last 3 seasons. He may be wonderful. He may be just waiting for the opportunity. A new 4-year contract, apparently. But it does smell a little bit, I would say. It does seem uninspired, unless, I guess, you want to pin it all on Brad Frost, or you just save a bunch of money, a la Ben Johnson. I don't know. I've told you my position. I like to think at a university this size in the Big Ten, especially when you're talking about the so-called major sports, men and women, that you shouldn't have to, nor should you want to, promote an assistant coach, either from your program or another program. That what you do is you give those individuals a chance to go someplace else smaller first to prove their head coaching bona fides, and then maybe you consider them down the road. And one would assume that in the world of women's hockey, this would be a very attractive job for all the obvious reasons. So, again, I can't tell you I know anything about Greg Boom May. You have any insight on Boom?
Not a whole lot, no. Okay.
But generally you think, well, if you're going to make the move to get rid of a guy who won titles for you, even if they weren't recent, that you're going to want to go a little bit bigger, and this feels small, just like the Ben Johnson hire felt small. And again, no offense to Ben, and in this case, no offense to Boom, but it just doesn't thrill me. Now, is it robbing Peter to pay Paul? No pun intended. Well, now he's got more money for the men's job. I don't know. I have no idea how that's going to work. So we will indeed see. John, the mail carrier, true, Dan, Denver does have everything, but figuratively and literally, and we have nothing. I I feel like the hockey versus basketball communities are akin to the Sharks and the Jets. There are definite people who identify strongly with one or the other and are not the most vocal, and are the most vocal. But the vast majority of us are in the gray area where we can appreciate aspects of more than one sport or political party simultaneously. Can't we just all get along? That's from 320 guy. Well, good analogy. I think there's some truth to that, I guess. I just think, I think in a sense, the worst thing that ever happened to this town is that the marketing wizards that be at the Minnesota Wild saddled us forever. When they came up with State of Hockey, and I still don't know, do we know the person who came up with State of Hockey? Has that ever been established? Because it was a Wild thing, correct?
It was. I feel like it was the owner at the time.
Was it the owner?
Yeah.
You might be right. Is that
I'm not.
Is that Nagley?
I think it was.
Whoever it was.
I have to watch a documentary again.
I actually think it worked against everybody because it elevated, I think, even more than ever, the defensiveness of your average hockey fan. Well, we're the State of Hockey. Well, how do you know? Well, because we just announced it. Well, we are. Once you announce something, it's true, isn't it? And then it's become this silly game of, well, we can't be the state of anything else. We're the State of Hockey. And no, we are the State of Hockey. Well, why? Well, because we said we are. Okay, I guess. I said.
Have you seen the high school tournament, Dan?
That's outstanding. It didn't need a mantra. It just was. But yeah, the problem is the State of Hockey has been thrown around wherever it's convenient. Like, when we want it, when it works to our benefit, we'll talk about pro. When it doesn't, well, the pro hockey's not that good. Well, we didn't mean pro. Even though the Wild came up with it, we actually meant the high school tournament and even the Gophers back when they were a factor. By the way, do I have this right?
By the way, my cracks research staff said that Minnesota Wild PR maven Billy Robertson.
Billy Rob.
So there you go.
Oh, the media marketing genius, Bill Robertson. Do I have this right, by the way, when it comes to state of basketball? I mean, if we grade on curves, folks from Iowa are probably just sort of rolling their eyes at my salute. Because I think the Iowa men's basketball team has already ascended to the Sweet 16. They knocked off the defending champion Florida Gators. And on the women's side, it looks to me like they are right now in a double overtime barn burner with Virginia. 60, right now, Virginia's up 3. Iowa's a 2 seed. Still 3.5 minutes to go in the game. So if Iowa can come back and pull that off, both Iowa teams, men's and women's, will have reached the Sweet 16. That's pretty good, isn't it? I mean, if that ever happened to us, I don't know what we would do. It'd be dogs and cats living together, that's for sure. John Athletic is due next. We'll get to some pro basketball stuff with him, maybe some football stuff too, and maybe some very tragic stuff as well. Johnny Athletic in just a minute here in the Fan.
It's time for Johnny Athletic, Johnny Athletic, Johnny Athletic, and he's on with Dan Barreiro right now.
Questions for Johnny, 64686, Bradshaw and Bryant, KFAN text line. RBC Wealth Management brings Johnny to us and to you each and every week. You may know this already, but some of your compadres, perhaps inspired by some of the more recent and most egregious examples of tanking, decided to go down memory lane and try to compile some of the great, most memorable or infamous moments of tanking that go way back. And they give credit at the top of their list for getting ahead of this all the way, well, basically 20 years ago, almost exactly on the anniversary. I think April 19th, 2006. So a month away. But still, 20 years ago in terms of years, when your favorite team, the Wolves, hosted the Memphis Grizzlies. And, of course, this was the game in which the Wolves were up 6 going into the fourth quarter, tied at regulation. And at that point, your guy, Mark Madsen, began taking three-point shots. He hadn't done so in about 2 years before that. He took 2 in the first overtime, took 5 more in the second overtime. I was baseline for that game, I think sitting next to Guardsy. So we, I guess, get some credit for maybe being ahead of our time when it comes to the whole tanking phenomenon. Should we be proud of that?
I think we have to. Should we raise a banner for that? We
Possibly.
don't have a whole lot of banners in Target Center that are Wolves responsible, and so I wrote our little excerpt for that piece, and I was there for that game as well. That was in my very early days of covering this team full time, and it was quite a scene, and that's not something I'll ever forget. But yeah, I mean, rare that the Wolves are on the front end of something. Of a trend in the NBA. They were on the good side with KG, drafting him out of high school, but in the tanking side, that's a little bit more of a notorious spot for us. But why not hang a banner and embrace it? That's what I look for.
Well, forgive me, because I did not note your byline. I see it now on that particular piece, so you're more than familiar with it. Will you refresh my memory on why we decided we used the pick to select Brandon Roy, and then we traded his draft rights to Portland for the draft rights to Randy Foye. Why were we too stupid to understand that, at least before injuries derailed things, Brandon Roy was a superior player?
Yeah, it was. I think at the time there was no doubt that Roy was the superior player. There was a belief in a lot of places, just not just to rake the Wolves over the coals for this, but a lot of teams, including the Wolves, felt like Brandon Roy's knees were going to give out imminently. Like he was just not going to be able to make it even through a couple of seasons in the league. It turned out that he had a phenomenal 3 to 4, 5 year run there at the start for Portland. And you could argue, Dan, that decision would have been really exacerbated Kevin Garnett's exit from the Timberwolves because if they draft Roy, they have more success early.
True.
Maybe KG never leaves. Who knows?
Good point.
But that was a big mistake because his knees eventually did give out, but not before just a brilliant start to his career, and certainly, head and shoulders above what Randy Foye ever gave them or anyone else in the league.
And in typical Timberwolves fashion, by the time we got him, he was starting to fall apart. In fact, I think he still had a minute for us. In my mind's eye, I remember us having Brandon Roy on Bumper to Bumper. I don't even know what the circumstance was, and he had a minute with us, right? Unfortunately, again, he could not sustain it.
Yeah, it was like I will remember it to this day. Like he came in. It was the 2012-13 season, and he had missed he was retired the previous year, but he wanted to come back and give it one more shot. And Rick Adelman was the coach, and he came into training camp, Dan, and after a year off, the knee was okay for a little bit, and everyone was raving.
Yes.
Just like couldn't believe, man, he looks fantastic. This is excellent. And he lasted 5 games that season, only played 5 just because the knees just would not hold up. But for that brief moment of time in training camp, I remember being in Mankato, talking to Rick Adelman about it, talking to Brandon Roy about how he felt. And there was real optimism that they, were going to resurrect his career.
We celebrated it.
Unfortunately, it just never worked out.
It just did. Yeah. And I think part of the reason I wanted to believe it was just the way he played when he was good.
Yeah.
He just was such an all-around, just a player who helps you win. Forget stats. He just made winning plays. He was an adult. He was, he had a great basketball IQ. And I think it was also that feeling of, well, maybe we can vindicate ourselves because maybe through some miracle of the time off, maybe you can get 2 or 3 years out of him. As it turned out, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep, that was it. And one of the all-time great guys, too. Just a really good dude, good leader, community involved. So, it was one of those guys that you really rooted for because his career was cut short. And, it really is, people will forget it, but, for those first 3-4 years in Portland, he was an assassin. He was so good. And in clutch moments, and not like overly athletic, but he got to his spots, and like it was so much fun to watch him play. And just one of the real unfortunate things that his career was cut short, because he was absolutely a Hall of Fame player if he would have had 10, 12 years in this league.
No question. All right, recency bias can be a very powerful thing and sometimes a bit dangerous. But I'm going to go ahead and ask you the question anyway. I'm going to ask you, hopefully, to rise above too much living in the afterglow of a very nice victory, one of the better Wolves victories of the season in Boston last night. Is it too optimistic? Is it too Pollyanna-ish to think that two complementary players, Bones and DeSumo, could actually, in their roles, change the outlook, certainly the spirit of a team that you could argue needed to put some extra cocktail into the mix?
I don't think it's too optimistic, Dan. I will say, because, and I know I was listening to your open and you hit on it, what this team has needed has not been, this team doesn't need more talent. They are individually talented, 1 through 8, 9 on this roster, and almost as talented as any team in the league, maybe OKC notwithstanding. But what they've needed is spirit, and what they've needed is connectivity, and that's been missing for a lot of this year. And whether that's out of boredom, whether that's out of just individual personalities being more on the sullen side, they need an adrenaline shot. And that is what both Bones Highland and Ayo Dosunmu provide. They not only play 150 miles an hour, but they have this kind of energy about them in their personalities that I think can revive some of that spirit. And if the spirit is there, the talent is there as well, and that can make them formidable in the playoffs. Am I ready to bet on it? No, not yet. I want to see a heck of a lot more going down the stretch, and I want to see how Anthony Edwards looks when he is reincorporated into this. But you can feel the vibes that Ayo and Bones bring on a daily basis in that locker room and on that court, and it is what this team needs. They need that kind of good feeling and to get them rolling that way, and then I think they play better because of it. So there's reason for optimism. I do believe it, and it's because of what those two are bringing from an intangible quality, let alone the shot making and the transition offense and that kind of thing.
All right, now another critical question. We all assume Anthony Edwards is going to return, right? His season is certainly not over. So there's always that tricky little mechanism where he's out for any great player is out for a few games or longer, and other people start assuming roles, taking up some of the slack, and they get used to a certain measure of freedom and responsibility. And then you have the challenge of when the superstar player comes back, the head coach finding a way to continue to tap into what those complementary resources did in the interim and making it still all work. Is that going to be a challenge?
I mean, it probably will be a little bit of a challenge, and it's not anything against Anthony Edwards. It's not anything against what this team is, but let's just look at the Boston Celtics from last night. They are clearly going through their reacclimation with Jason Tatum.
No question.
And they have won a championship, and Jason Tatum is a first-team All-NBA guy, and you can see them trying to figure out, okay, is it Brown's turn? Is it Tatum's turn? Like, when does Tatum turn it on and become like the main offensive focal point, and when does he kind of drift off into the corner and just be more of a decoy and all of those things? And so I do think that there will be a little bit of that with Anthony Edwards coming back. I thought it was very interesting what Chris Finch said last night about Bones Highland, and he said one of the priorities when Anthony Edwards returns is to make sure that Bones remains in attack mode.
Yes.
Remains looking for his own offense, because Bones, understandably so, will defer to Anthony Edwards when he's on the court with him. You're the face of the franchise. You're our big-time shot maker. I'm going to get the ball to you, and then I'll take your table scraps. But where Bones is most dangerous is when he is creating for himself and being aggressive. And so I think you're already starting to see some of the groundwork being laid for how they are going to handle it when Ant does come back. And I think, Ant is a really emotionally intelligent guy, so I think watching how this team is playing without him will help him kind of cater his game to what's working and what's not. But yeah, I do expect maybe a little bit of bumpiness whenever he first comes back, just as they kind of figure all of this out and try and get the pieces to kind of click into place here.
You wrote most recently about Bones' joy. You've also written previously about his pain. For those who've not paid attention, how are they connected?
Yeah, it's a remarkable story, Dan, and I hope people kind of go back to The Athletic and check out my piece, or just go and do a little more deep research. But when Bones was in high school, a junior in high school in Delaware, he was a highly touted recruit. He lived in a house with 12 relatives. They were watching the NCAA tournament literally 2 days, March 25th, 8 years ago is when this happened. And the house caught on fire. He was in his second floor bedroom, trapped in his room, had to jump out a window to save himself, tore his patellar tendon in his knee while on the fall down, lost his grandmother and an 11-month-old cousin in that fire, and had his career threatened by this injury. And then makes his way all the way back. He was kind of like a Pied Piper in Delaware. Everyone really gravitated to him. He gets back, goes to VCU, has a good college career. But I think like that tragedy really did fuel some perspective for him, because he went to Denver as a first-round pick, kind of flamed out there because he had a little too much success too early and got a little too big of a head. Gets traded to the Clippers, doesn't play in Los Angeles, comes to the Timberwolves on a two-way deal. Tim Connolly gets his guy back. But there's this perspective and this refreshing sort of positivity about him, because he basically says, look, everything I've seen on the basketball court, any adversity, is nothing compared to what I've been through in my personal life at home. And so he has this positive aura about him, and I do think it's infectious. And I think it's really admirable the way that he conducts himself. And when you think of everything he's been through, both in his basketball career, but certainly also in that house fire and losing those close loved ones when he was just a junior in high school, to see where he's come now to be a critical part of a team that believes it can win in the playoffs, it's one of the better stories across the league this season. It's that good.
And there's no question, though, it's not going to have a chance to manifest itself if that player is not allowed the minutes and does not then at least intermittently take advantage of those minutes, right? Because I think you have to show any coach, if you give me a little more time to do this, a little more freedom to do it, here's what I'm capable of doing. And then presumably once that player does, it becomes even easier for the head coach to say, yeah, let's find a way to bottle this and make sure we're getting more consistency out of it. But it starts with, you got to have the opportunity and you got to make something of it, or else nobody's going to buy it, as other than, okay, every 5 games he might score 20 points on you.
Right, yeah. He's averaged 20 points a game in the 4 that Ant has been out.
Yeah.
And he's been consistently energetic. Even when he's not scoring 20, he'll come in and give you 10, but it's a fast 10. It's an impactful 10. And I think that's been the key. And I, to your point, Dan, Finchie takes a lot of flack, some of it deserved, some of it not. But one thing about him, he absolutely has cleared the runway for Bones to play over a first-round pick in Rob Dillingham, over one of his favorite players of all time in Mike Conley.
Yeah.
And eventually Bones certainly earned that time, But in the political realm of the NBA, where you have players making more money or higher draft picks, things like that, it's often that coaches will just say, look, we got to go with the guys we've invested all this money and draft capital in. But Finchie's given this former two-way guy who came in on a non-guaranteed minimum contract the opportunity as well. And then Bones has kept going and kept earning it. So I think it's been good all the way around so far, from organizational standpoint, coaching standpoint, and from the player standpoint.
The kids all love the term intentional. It's become one of the most popular sports buzzword cliches. So in that vein, with that inspiration, how intentional was Finchie's call out of Julius Randle after our most recent setback, of course, before the game against the Portland Trailblazers?
Yeah, Dan, I think it was intentional because he's been very intentional in not doing that over the last 2 years. I think there is a belief among Finch, among others, that the way to coach Julius Randle is to be candid with him behind the scenes in film sessions and those sorts of things, but publicly very supportive, because there's this thought that maybe Julius will take that personally and it won't go the right way. But I do think after that Portland game, I think Finch was a little desperate. And my lead off of on the Athletic was drastic times call for drastic measures. And Julius is just not playing well, especially not rebounding well. He's averaging a career low in rebounds this season. And I think that there was a little bit of helplessness that Chris Finch was feeling in that moment and being like, I've tried everything else. Now I've got to go this way. And it wasn't browbeating him, but it was a matter of fact saying that what Julius is doing rebounding wise is not good enough. And he did not play well offensively. He was 3 for 14 against Boston, but he did have 9 rebounds.
Yeah.
So there were a few moments where he did play good defense in that game. And so whether did that work or not, we'll see over the long haul. But I do think it did speak to this sort of sense of exasperation from Finch that he's bent over backward to try and be accommodating to Julius, to try and be supportive of him. And lately, it's just like none of that is working, so let's try the other way. And I just don't think that he was speaking off the cuff in that moment. I think he was trying to send a bit of a message and stoke a different fire.
You mentioned the degree to which a very dangerous situation involving a fire has sort of helped Bones, form a second life, so to speak, everything after that. Much closer to home, we find out this weekend in just sort of incomprehensible, unspeakable terms that Jessie Pierce and her 3 children, I believe along with their dog, were killed in a house fire. And the testimonials from people who knew her a lot better than I did have just absolutely poured in. They've been a revelation to me, and maybe a reminder of how an individual, because you could say, all right, are you in a mainstream world of still newspapers and, big radio stations and TV stations, etc., that an individual could create the presence for herself that she did, in this case, largely in the hockey community, is quite a testament to her story. Can you speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can just tell you how remarkable she was as a person, as a mom, as a writer. When we first started The Athletic 8-9 years ago now, it was sort of the Wild West. We were just kind of trying to, patch things together as much as we could. And Jessie was a helper for Michael Russo on the hockey beat, just kind of to try and give us enough content to keep people coming back. But the thing that always stood out to me, even back then, long before she was even established to the degree that she got to over the last couple of years, Dan, is we would hold events and subscribers would come and we'd talk, and, Russo and I were, kind of more of the established people and all that. But Jessie would show up and would just fill the entire room with her presence and would be right on our level because she was so ambitious. She was so confident. She had so much energy about her. that there was just no denying like that she was a star just waiting to be discovered. And to her credit and her credit alone, she built herself up into this force of nature in the hockey community. She, made her podcast and made her voice and did it her way that really resonated with fans. She would stand out in the freezing cold temperatures in a bikini and tell, people what the lines were, the hockey lines were, and like all this stuff, and did it her way. And she brought her kids all along with her to do it. And the way that she was able to juggle all of it, it's superhuman stuff, Dan. And like, she was absolutely the best of us. And, my heart breaks. Everyone's heart is breaking for all of that situation. And you just see the outpouring, not only locally, but nationally across the NHL. Everyone knew her. No one had a bad word to say about her. And, I just think about her, the light in her eyes was so touching and so overpowering in a great way. It's just a tremendous loss for all of us here, and and everyone. Just that her and her kids are not around anymore. Just terrible.
The players just bringing up the subject. The general manager, or Bill Guerin, whatever his fancy title is at this point, Heinze, everybody, right, has volunteered to speak up on her influence and her popularity and her sort of connection. And it was interesting, especially for me, to listen to Guerin, because Guerin is very much, Guerin obviously can have his battles with people in the media, as is well known. But he still does deep down. I think he means this. I think he views it as all part of the same machine and part of the same larger family. He spoke to that a little bit, that his understanding that there's room for everybody in this thing, and that she had, again, forged an identity beyond just another person who covers hockey, right? There's no question about that. I thought he spoke very eloquently, and I thought very honestly about that.
It was fantastic. The stuff that the Wild has shared publicly about her, just the classy as ever from Bill Guerin and from the Wild, but also too expanding it. Like, there were coaches, there were players from other teams that maybe even never played for the Wild that she would interview for NHL.com.
Yep.
I mean, she just forged connections immediately at the snap of a fingers. And here's the other cool thing about what Guerin said, Dan, is that you could maybe construe that as, well, here's this, this very team-friendly journalist who would only, say great things about the team and would be really easy to deal with. One thing that was great about Jessie is she spoke her mind.
She did.
When the Wild were not playing well, she was critical of them, did it in an amazing way. She was not just a cheerleader type. She was a real hockey, just puckhead, like really, really into it, and did a super intelligent, super fun and entertaining show and all that. But it was not by any means just all positive, all this stuff. She earned respect for just the way that she did it on her terms. And I was so just incredibly impressed by the way she built her brand up from nothing to what it was. And just seeing everyone's response to it, it just validates how I felt about her and how everyone else did. Just incredible. The best of us, for sure.
And I believe it was either the day of or the day before. Even the most recent photo she had was of her 3 children. And that's, you'd say, well, that's the obvious, but it brings it home in such devastating fashion. You look at the looks on the faces of those 3 kids and obviously the pride that she had in them, and it just it humanizes it in a way that makes it hard not to cry. It really does.
She was on a show, Dan, with our friend Judd Zogad on Friday, and then 2 of the kids came in at the very end and just kind of got in the shot.
Yeah.
And I just don't even know how you go on with that. It honestly reminded me, Dan, when it hit me, when I found out who it was, I thought about Kobe and his daughter going down in the helicopter crash.
Yeah, right.
Like that's when you add children to the mix of
That's it. Yep.
and just the devastation ratchets up 100-fold. And that she brought her kids along the way on her whole journey, bringing the baby into the locker room when she had to back in the day and all this stuff. Like the connection that they had was, it's, I can't even fathom. And, the tragic level of this is off the charts. Just sad for everyone involved. It's just awful.
The very human response too is, what happened? Why was it so? It must have been something must have happened where they could not get out of the home. And I know that investigation is ongoing. Could it have been an smoke inhalation? Who knows but that's, I think, part of, I think it's only human nature to wonder, why was it so difficult? Because it obviously was to get them out of there, and all that will, I'm sure, come in due time as well. It's just the whole thing is such a horrific prospect. I appreciate your comments as always, sir, and we will chat next week. Thank you, Johnny.
All right, thanks, Dan.
I appreciate it. John Krasinski, we call him Johnny Athletic, the artist formerly known as AP Sports Guy.